Okay, the next thing that we should talk about is you can't talk about Buddhist psychology without talking about attachment. Attachment is a really important idea. Um, and this is just another concept that involves um, reinforcing a misleading picture of how the world is. So attachment is sometimes confused with the English word desire, which desire has a broad scope. Um, but basically, attachment is not just wanting something or appreciating it, but kind of wanting to have it, wanting to keep it. It's a kind of ownership concept. Um, it's I think of it in terms of a metaphor of stickiness that helps me. It's like you're kind of stuck on things. There's stuff that you have, and there's ways that people think about you, and it's like you really don't want to let them go. You're really kind of like when if to think about. I think about when you take a hike and there's those little nettles that get in your clothes, and it like really doesn't want to come out, and it's kind of like that where it's like maybe I have some reputation as a smart person, but then I might it might come a time when it's like that's not that useful, and but I really don't want to let it go because it feels like that's who I am. I'm an intelligent person, right? I don't want to let that go. And so you can kind of contrast that with, for example, things that we do kind of appreciate and have an easier time letting go. So it's like there's a nice sunny day, and then when it's over, it's like it's over. I'm not like, oh, I wish this day could go on forever and ever and ever and ever, and I would never go to sleep. And what? Or like I sometimes think like you have a concert, and it's like after the concert, you're like, oh, it was great. You're not like, oh, I'm really sad that the concert isn't still going right now. I want it to just go on forever. You might have that feeling, but lots of times you just have it, and then it's over, and that's fine. But people don't tend to feel that way about, for example, their reputation or their fame or their success or their money. It's not like you have it and then you kind of it was here and then it's gone. That's like you really want to keep it. You get a good reputation or good amount of money, and then it's like you don't want to let it go. But because of the kinds of things hey, quit it. Because of the kinds of things we were talking about in the previous weeks, because of impermanence, you're going to lose those things. Keeping them is impossible. Because of non-self, in fact, there's not even really a you to have those things. Hey, those are my things. So there's, we sort of saw this before, where like it turns out ownership is kind of like it's just like couriership. You're just taking care of it for a little while, and in fact there's not even a you to have it, and there's not even a thing to have on the Buddhist view. So that sounds pretty lofty. Like one way to get into it is to think about modern kind of legal ideas about ownership and contrast them with common sense ideas about ownership. So on a common sense idea of ownership is like, there's a thing and this thing is mine. I have it. The end. That's what it means to own it. There's a thing, there's me, and I own it. It's mine. But when you talk about legal ownership, lots of times in legal ownership, it's like if you think about like a plot of land or something like that, there's a bunch of different rights that can get divvied up, and in fact different people can own the right. So like someone might own the land, someone might own the building on the land, a different person might own the air above the land, the airspace. Someone might own the mineral rights to the stuff under the ground. It's like, actually what happens is like, there's just a bunch of rights that sort of get divvied up, and the thing itself kind of drops away, and even the owners kind of drop away. It's just like certain people have rights to do certain things, the end. That's all that ownership amounts to. So if you're in that headspace, that's closer to the neighborhood that Buddhists are in. They're just like, ownership is just, essentially a relation between two conventional fictions. So when this pen is just a bunch of parts organized in a certain way. I'm just a bunch of skandhas organized a certain way, and it's like I happen, the bits that make this up happen to be together for now. The bits that make this up happen to be together for now, and I'm able to use it for a little while before both of them sort of disintegrate and go their separate ways, and the bits are in some other composite. That's all that ownership ever was for a Buddhist. So that's ownership. Another important case that we should talk about is identities. That's another thing that, especially in a modern context, people are quite attached to. So, we might be thinking like, oh, I'm Canadian or American or Chinese. I'm a student, a professor, an actor, a drummer, a singer, an activist, a Buddhist. These are all kind of identities that people can get attached to in that same way. They can get hung up on it. And that's bad, because anything you're getting hung up on, it's not about the thing. It's about reinforcing a misleading sense of what you are and what's going on in the world. So if you start to feel like any of those things are kind of essential properties of an independent self, on the Buddhist view, that's counterproductive. And you can kind of think of this, I often think about this in a kind of case where like you get an extra pain. There's an extra bad thing that happens when you have a kind of attachment to a certain identity. So like, suppose this class is over, and then like I look at the student feedback, and everyone says, "Oh, this class was terrible. I hated it. I didn't learn anything. Whatever." I might be like, "Oh, I gave a bad semester. The semester was bad. I gave a bad class this semester." But then I might also think, I'm a bad teacher. Right? That's a separate thing. It's not only did I give a bad semester of classes, but now I am a bad teacher. You can think of it like, not only did I fail at something, now I am a failure. And that's like an extra sting. Or you can kind of think it's like if I strongly identify with my job and then I lose my job, not only did I lose my job and the money that comes with it, but I lost my identity. Who am I if I'm not, whatever, regional manager, associate professor, whatever. So on the Buddhist view, that really is suffering, but it's suffering because all that stuff was based on a mistake. I thought that there was a me that had this property of being, regional manager or associate professor or whatever. And I thought that would continue. But because of impermanence, it definitely won't. And because of non-self, it never was really there to begin with. It was just a kind of conventional relational composite. That's all that it was. And it was useful for certain things. And that's how you're supposed to be relating to this. So the idea is that attachment is bad because it reinforces a sense of self, and particularly identities are thorny in this way, because it's not like to say that you can't have any identities, but you have to keep in mind that they're impermanent in the sense that they're not going to last, and also they're kind of constantly changing, and they're also relational. They're not properties of an independent self in the way that like you might think that like fire has the property of being hot or something like that. It's not like that. It's just a kind of conventional relational thing that people have decided upon. And we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk in a few weeks about the two truths, about how to balance this kind of everyday view and this kind of more radical view that you can't own things and there's no identity and whatever. So there's a tension there, and we'll talk about that. Buddhists are aware of that, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the two truths.